Last Monday afternoon, I had figured out a plan for the rest of my day. We had a New Oli worship here that night. I had to pick Elijah up. I hadn't yet gone to lunch, and it was starting to get later in the afternoon, so I thought, I am going to go home, eat lunch, work from home for a little while until I have to go get him, come back, make dinner, and then go to the worship service that evening. Now, right about the time that I got home, I saw that there were 4 gigantic Duke Energy trucks, nose to tail, parked across the street from my house. And as I got out of my vehicle, a young guy came up to me and said, "Hey, boss, got to let you know we have a leaky transformer." Now, I did not know transformers could get leaky, but apparently they have mineral oil in them. And he said, in about 15 minutes, we're going to shut off the power. It'll probably be out for a couple hours, but we have a big crew, so we'll try to get through this work quickly. So I now had an interruption to my plan for the day. Instead of just sitting down and sending emails, which I could not do because I had no power, then I couldn't cook dinner because the oven and the toaster oven and the microwave, none of that stuff would work. So I rearranged the whole rest of my day. Now that was just a minor power interruption. Out in California, they've had to shut off the power to whole thousands and thousands of people to prevent wildfires. Now when you have a major power interruption, you really have to rearrange your time, right? You got to figure out what you can do about your food. You have to figure out, like, if you're in a hot place and you have no AC, can you even stay at home? If it's cold and you have electric heat and that's not working, can you stay at home? Like, there's all kinds of things. If your electronics don't work and that's where you work, all of that stuff has to get rearranged. And that's with this interruption of electricity. Now, in today's gospel, we find 10 people whose lives were not interrupted by a power outage, but by suffering. They get this interruption by suffering when they contract leprosy. And we don't know what happened in their lives before. We don't know what their stories are, but what we do know is that they have had to rearrange everything because of that interruption, and that rearranging has gotten them gathered together as a group of 10 who keeps their distance from people, and who even when they say Jesus, just shout out to him and say, "Lord, have mercy." Now, though we don't know their stories, we do know what it's like to have our lives interrupted by suffering. Sometimes it's the call like they got, right, that says you have a disease now or an illness that's going to be difficult to deal with. Sometimes it's the boss sitting you down and letting you know that everybody's jobs are going away. Sometimes it's a relationship thing that's gone south, or a financial thing that has, whether it's the whole economy or your own personal economics that have gone awry. And we find then that we have to rearrange. We have to rearrange because of that sickness or that unemployment or that financial stuff or that relationship, and then come to new places of normal. It happens when people die. And they're no longer with us, and we have to now adjust to their presence not being with us every day. But the interruption by suffering in this story is not the main part of the story, because a second interruption happens, and that is an interruption by grace. They shout out to Jesus, and Jesus sends them on their way to the priest, and on the way they are cleansed. And this interruption by grace then allows them to reorder their lives again, because it's a positive interruption, not the negative one of the leprosy. And as they begin in their being cleansed to reorder their lives again, one of them comes back to Jesus, falls down on the ground, worship, praise, thanksgiving, and Jesus asks him, "Where's the other 9?" Now, we get a little bit of what's in the head of the one as he comes back with this gratitude. What we don't know is what happened to the other 9, but I think we can maybe guess. I've been on a lot of airplanes in my life, and early on more than now, but a couple years ago I walked up to the plane, and you know when you stand on the jetway and then you step onto the plane, there's like that moment where you're waiting for the person in front of you to go. And I stood there and I looked, and you can see all the rivets, like everything they did to put the plane together. And that was when I realized that an airplane is just a metal tube. It's a metal tube that we have attached some wings and engines and wheels to and put some electronics in. And our engineering ingenuity has allowed us to put a metal tube up in the sky to fly. That's pretty amazing. Now, when this happened a couple years ago, I got on the plane, I'm in the back of the plane, and a guy gets on behind me, and I hear him very loudly say, "What? No Wi-Fi? This is ridiculous." And I was thinking, for thousands and thousands of years of human existence, people looked up into the sky and saw birds and said, maybe we can do that. And some drew pictures of how we might do that, but nobody figured it out until like just over 100 years ago. So in all of human history, there's this little tiny bit where we could get in a tube and get launched into the sky and get someplace real fast. Most of human history, this guy would have had to walk where he was going, right? Or ride a horse. But no, we're getting on a plane, but he's got no sense of awe or wonder about that. He's just mad because there's no Wi-Fi, right? On a plane. Like, I was a little kid, they didn't have anything on a plane, right? Now it's got Wi-Fi, and he was mad. So I wonder what his attitude would have been had the Wi-Fi come back on. Based on his reaction, I don't think he would have been like, oh, this is wonderful, right? Because whatever he was planning had been interrupted. Maybe he had a deadline at work and he was going to finish it on the plane. Maybe he had a movie he was going to watch. Who knows? But my guess is, had the Wi-Fi come back on, his response would have been, that's right. That's what this is supposed to be. I'm supposed to have Wi-Fi when I'm on a plane, right? That kind of sense of entitlement. Now, we don't know if any of these 9 that didn't come back to Jesus felt like they were entitled to healing. Maybe they were really good people and didn't understand why they were suffering and just felt like God finally got it right and fixed them the way they were supposed to be, right? We don't know if that's true, but it could be. When we have a power outage in this country, it's an interruption from what is normal. Both times I've been to Haiti, I learned that in Haiti, the electricity, sometimes it's on, sometimes it's off, and you have no idea when those times are going to be. So if you have medication that needs to be refrigerated, you have a diesel generator that runs all the time. But you want to turn it off when the power comes back on so you're not wasting diesel, right? And one of the things they told us was that craftspeople that need power tools to do their work will sleep with the light next to their bed. And when the light comes on, they now know there's power, and then they'll get up and work, even in the middle of the night, because the power may not be on tomorrow. So if you think about that, their day to day is just kind of, it's all an interruption, but when the power is on, it's time to get to work. And so I wonder if out of some of these 9, maybe a couple of the people constantly lived on the edge. Maybe before it was leprosy, it was something else. Something about employment or something with death of a loved one. And every time there's just something else that keeps coming so that when their leprosy gets cleansed, they got to get back to work. Like they got to get to it. They don't have time to think about going and giving thanks. They just got to go and keep on living because that's where they're at. Maybe that's true, maybe not. Also among the 9, I wonder if there were people who just felt like they were doing what they were supposed to do, right? Jesus told them, go show yourself to the priest, so they went and did that and just didn't think about what comes next. When I was an IT person, one of the companies I worked for, your boss could nominate you for like extra awards, like a gift card that you would get. And my boss was really good at that because he liked to take care of his team. I'm not sure we ever were doing anything amazing and extraordinary, but every once in a while you would get like this gift card, and it was fantastic. But it just felt like we were doing what we were supposed to be doing, right? It didn't feel like this great gift of grace that I should go fall on my face and say thank you for this, right? We just kind of kept on going, doing what we're supposed to be doing. And I think amongst those 9, there were probably some that just, yep, Jesus told us to go to the priest, and we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, and now we can go back home. So maybe there were some that felt entitled. Maybe there were some that were suffering, and this is just a break in that so they could get to work. Maybe a good chunk of them just were doing what they were doing and kept on doing it. But the one didn't. The one was so impacted by it that he came back. And I think we can learn something both about how we live life. I wonder how often interruptions by grace come into our life and we actually feel like we deserved it and don't think to say thanks to God. Or maybe we're just trying to get through each day and little interruptions of grace don't register as something we can take time away to pause and give thanks. Or probably most of the time we just keep going and not thinking so much about all of the stuff that God might be doing around us. But in the life of this one, there's a pattern that we, I think, can learn from. There are three different words that happen in this story that talk about what happens to the one. The first word is that they are cleansed. So they go on their way. How many of the 10 are cleansed? 10. So we start from the beginning that this interruption of grace applies to everyone. Did they do anything to earn that? No, right? They just run into Jesus. Jesus cleanses them. So we start first off with the gift of grace. Next, the 10th one realizes that he has been healed. Is healed the same thing as cleansed? It's not. Cleansed is a word that has to do with rituals and being cleaned. And in this case, being cleansed meant they were healed of their leprosy, but it's more in the sense of being washed and cleansed. But then the one realizes that he has been healed, which has more to do with disease and like physical well-being, right? So they're all cleansed, but the one realizes he's healed. So he comes back to Jesus, and at the end, the story tells us that Jesus looks at him and says, "Go, your faith has made you well." Is that the same thing as being healed? You can shake your heads no. Is it the same thing as being cleansed? No. The word there actually is the word that means saved, like your life is saved. In John 3:16, that's the famous passage that God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him, that's 16. Verse 17 says that Jesus came not to condemn the world, but to save it. Same word. So cleansed, then realizes he's healed, and then gets to this place of being saved. Now, I don't think it's about eternal life in this case. I think it's that Jesus is looking at him and saying, your space of thankfulness, the place of worship and praise that you have found yourself in, that is a deeper way of living into this gift of grace that you've been given. The others, whatever reasons, they went on and did what they were going to do, but this one found a place of worship, praise, and thanksgiving, and Jesus acknowledges that as him being saved. It's taken him to this just deeper place of what it means to be a human being that lives with God's interruptions of grace. So he's cleansed, realizes he's healed, and then he goes to this place of faithfulness, but it is this thankfulness that gets him to this new place of living more whole. Now, this is what I think we can learn as people, right? We talk about Jesus' death and resurrection as a gift of grace. Has that already happened? Yes. And who is it for? Everybody, right? So just like all 10 lepers got cleansed, all of us have been given this gift of grace. Now, what that looks like in the world around us is the tricky part. Sometimes it can look like a healing from a disease. And maybe it's not miraculous in the way that Jesus just tells them to go. Maybe the doctor that God gave incredible gifts of healing to is the one that brought that to you. Sometimes it might look like a neighbor bringing you a meal when you're in a tough spot and it's hard to keep up. Sometimes it might look like somebody forgiving you when you have done them wrong. Like there's all kinds of ways that our lives can be interrupted by grace. And I think this story is an invitation for us to look for that, to expect it, to live with a sense of awe and wonder and expect that we will see interruptions of grace around us. I have 2 sets of like safety glasses I wear when I'm working with tools, because I'm not good with tools, and with yard work. Now, one of them is clear. And if I wear those, everything looks the same as it does if I have them on or if I don't have them on. But the other pair are tinted a little bit yellow. So when I wear those, everything still looks the same, but it looks totally different. There's just a different tint, a different lighting. So the tree is still a tree, but it's kind of a yellowy tree, but it also looks a little bit clearer in some ways. And this is what I think it means to live with gratitude and worship and praise, is that it puts glasses on us that when we go out into the world, we go with a heart of thankfulness, expecting grace to be there. And when we expect grace to be there, guess what? We'll see it, because God's grace is all around us. God created the whole world and all of us and created us as the body of Christ to carry that grace into the world and to interrupt people's suffering with grace. And so part of our job as people of faith is to just look for it and to celebrate it, to have a sense of wonder about it, and to point it out when we see it, and to give thanks and praise to God as we go. Now here's the beautiful thing. Every time we gather in this place, we practice this. First they're cleansed, then he realizes he's healed, and then comes saved. What do these waters do? Cleanse us, right? So we gather in this space. We are gathered around these cleansing waters. Then we do confession, and we acknowledge our brokenness, and then we receive the absolution, right? That's a point of healing. Then we sing, Lord, have mercy, and we sing praise. We work our way through the whole liturgy, and it's an acknowledgement of our brokenness, but also the healing that grace can bring us. And then we gather around the table, and one of the things we call that is the Eucharist. And what does Eucharist mean? Thanksgiving. So we come and we gather around these waters of cleansing. We recognize that we're healed, but then we give thanks for the saving work that God has done in our life. So we practice this every week. And part of what we do as God's people is practice that so that when we go out from here, we can take it all with us. We can take with us our baptisms. We can take with us the healing that we know we have in Jesus. We can take with us the saving work that Jesus does, knowing that we have worshiped, praised, and given thanksgiving at this table that feeds us for that journey. So as we go out into the world, we are certainly going to encounter interruptions caused by suffering. Happens all the time. But also, right along with that, right? That's what happens on the cross. Right along with that, there's always resurrection that God is working. And may we, in our practice here in this place, have our eyes open so that when we go out, we can see that grace, celebrate it, give thanks for it, and point it out to others so that all people can know God's love as we go. Amen.